And welcome to another edition of Yonkers Voice. Today we are at 600 North Broadway at Kids Aloud Preschool, and our guest is Vincent Morrone, who's running for New York State Assemblyman. Vince, the only question is why?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons why I'm running for office. I think that the people of Yonkers should ask themselves a fundamental question, and that is, are we going to keep electing politicians that further the 40-year decline of our middle class and the ever-growing gap between the wealthiest New Yorkers and everyone else? Or do we push for some sort of economic reform that creates jobs, raises wages, provides health care and education opportunity for all of us?
That sounds great, but your two predecessors who held this office, one was a lawyer, Shelly Mayer, and the person before that was an experienced politician, now Mayor Spano. And as a political novice, it's almost as though you'd be learning on the job. So how effective could you be should you win that position?
Well, I think I can be very effective. I think that I'm not a political person. This is my first campaign, but I've been actively engaged in the political process from the sidelines. But I believe it's in having the courage of your convictions politically and being able to go to Albany and say, this is what I believe in, this is what the community that has sent me to Albany believes in, and these are the policies that we want to see enacted into legislation. And I'm not saying that one assembly member is going to make every change possible, but when people all across the state stand up and say, well, these are the issues that we care about, then you can begin to have some sort of systemic change within New York politics.
But again, you seem to be approaching the job as an idealist as opposed to a pragmatist. And right now, you've got a city, Yonkers in particular, that's facing a financial crisis. You're talking about laying off cops, laying off firemen, laying off teachers, and this is a situation that requires a lot of detail, a lot of thinking, a lot of strategy, as opposed to what we should be doing.
Well, as you mentioned, our last two assembly members, as you say, approached this problem, and of course, you've just mentioned that we still have these problems, and they've approached us as pragmatists, as political insiders. So maybe it's time we take a different course of action as well, and we could try, standing up for issues firmly. And all across that's how I believe, again, that's a different form, a different way we can go about it and make sure we get change that way. Instead of just playing this insider political game that's being played in Albany every day when legislation is in session.
Okay, let's talk about a hypothetical situation. Let's say that you are the assemblyman, and again, next year you would encounter the same budget crisis. How would you handle that differently than the way it's being handled now?
Well, the budget crisis in Yonkers, in my belief, stems from one major issue that it goes across the state, is that I believe in order to have true reform, so we're not entirely in this budget crisis year after year after year, we need to change the way we receive funding in the state. We need to make sure that corporations, Wall Street, speculations being taxed, polluters that pollute our atmosphere are being taxed. The state would then have the excess resources needed to be able to provide the services to Yonkers so we can fully fund our city, we can fully fund our schools. We can no longer, I believe, continue to have middle class property taxes as the sole source of revenue. I don't think that's working. It hasn't been working for a long time.
But let's talk about the polluters. They already have some laws in effect by way of the EPA. It's a difficult issue to enforce. What polluters are we talking about? Because how many factories are actually polluting now?
There's
in New York, in the areas covered. I mean, you're talking about we've got your districts are New Rochelle, Bronxville, Harrison, I believe.
Strictly just Yonkers.
Strictly just Yonkers.
Yeah.
But how much industry is in Yonkers that's actually polluting?
It's not about just Yonkers industries that are polluting. I'm a representative of Yonkers for the state. So, it's the entire state that we're dealing with. So it's not just me being here for Yonkers only worried about the things that are attributed specifically to this city. We're talking about the entire New York state and all pollution within that state. I'm just one voice from this particular area representing the many. So there are polluters. We have carbon polluters. We could put a carbon tax in New York. That would bring in a lot of revenue that would help solve these problems. Again, we need the revenue in the state in order to fundamentally tackle these problems, the revenue sources that we have. So again, not necessarily only specifically Yonkers, but it's, a voice from Yonkers dealing with the entire state of New York.
What about tax breaks for businesses? And a case in point, there was a lot of publicity about two famous artists that bought a former Yonkers City jail. The building, I believe, was at one point appraised for $2.1 million. What happened was it was reevaluated, and they ended up purchasing that property for, I think it was about $1 million. But then they got tax breaks. They got tax breaks for $300,000.
Okay.
So in essence, the ticket on that building was $600,000. Now, in the interim, they said that they were this would be a gallery. This would benefit the community. They rehabbed the building. They said they were going to use it would generate jobs. I don't think anybody knows any local Yonkers people who worked on rehabbing that property. Then to compound everything, 3 years down the pipe, the owner of that building said that he had decided that he wanted to keep the building private for his own personal collection, 10,000 square feet of art space that this person decided he would keep for his vast collection, as opposed to using it as a performance space for the community, which he had promised in the beginning.
That's a terrible situation, and I don't condone that. And I think that seems like a city hall issue, but I think, just as my own observation
It's a tax issue.
Yeah, it's a tax issue, but we have to be more stringent on who we're giving tax breaks to. People have to be able to prove in a more concrete, foundational way that they're going to provide jobs to the community benefits, and if they're not going to be doing that, they shouldn't be receiving tax breaks.
Well, there's been no check and balance, and the argument is that you need to give tax breaks to businesses because those businesses generate jobs, and there is some truth to that. Because there have been businesses, construction, some developers have come in and they've used local labor, not a lot,
right?
But they've used local labor, and it does generate jobs. But there's got to be a way to measure that.
Yes, I think that, as a legislature, we can go into more details and finding more nuanced and articulate ways to write the legislation as to make sure that that sort of situation doesn't happen in Yonkers. But I do believe that if the business is coming in and bringing in jobs, then it certainly should be a tax break. But I also think that in the state of New York, we could go further. And especially in Yonkers community, we need good businesses coming in. If we could provide tax breaks to companies that are willing to come in and offer employee ownership options, where employees could come in and be part owners in that business, it helps not only the owner, it helps the city, it helps the employees, it helps everybody in the community, and that's a sort of industry that we can go behind giving specific tax breaks to.
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of it's. I'm not putting it down. It's a soft Marxist concept, which in a way is a good thing to a degree. But
it's helping. Not only is it helping the city, it's helping community. It's helping the people that live here.
Where has that worked before?
It's worked all over the country. There's examples of in Vermont where they have employee ownership businesses that are doing very well, and there's no reason why. We need to articulate how to do that to the people. We have to make a campaign in terms of educating not only employees, city municipalities into the benefits of that, but if we can begin to start that process, that enables economic growth for companies, for city budgets, and also for the people that live in the district, which is very important. We need to bring in good jobs specifically to the district that we belong to, the Yonkers district.
Yeah, I mean, you need to bring in good jobs, but also everybody says bring in good jobs, but those good jobs also require a skill set. And the skill set begins within the public school system and also in trade schools if somebody doesn't want to go to college. And right now, we're faced with a public school system that is, one, overcrowded,
Yep.
and two, is not is not preparing kids for the skills that they need to go out there and get those good jobs. So people who get the so-called good jobs are people who are coming from outside of the area, and the cycle continues. So how do you change that?
Exactly, and it's a systematic approach to it. Like you say, our school districts, to no fault of their own, these students are in overcrowded, underfunded schools that are limiting their abilities, to question, to think, to imagine, and they need to have that in order to solve and innovate problems. So we need
I don't
to.
know. You said this through no fault of their own.
The students, to no fault of their
To
own,
the
are they
students, but
putting
as far as
put
the school
in?
management,
Of course, no,
there's
don't
a
get me
45
wrong.
Yeah, there's $45 million deficit. So who's minding the store?
No.
Somebody's
That's not
at
what
fault.
I did not mean that
Okay.
the management was not at fault. Certainly at fault. For me, if we're going to continue on the merry-go-round for another few years of this, we need to tackle the problem. And I believe true change for the education will come with not only more funding for the school district, a lot of people are going to say that around here, but I think we need to urge our next mayor to get mayoral control of the school district. Now, with mayoral control of the school district, like we're able to do in New York City, there comes a lot of power, but also a lot of accountability. So the mayor would have discretionary over hiring, firing, spending, but then we could see where the budgets are going. We could see, there won't be a black hole where money just dissipates into. There's a lot of finger pointing between the Board of Ed, state legislation, City Hall. No one wants to take accountability. If through changes in taxation, we have more funds at the state level, and those funds can come into Yonkers, and then there's accountability within elected officials, that, to me, is the only way you even begin to have real change in the process.
Where would you stand on the issue of charter schools? I know the charter schools, Westchester County only has, I believe, 2 charter schools, one in Mount Vernon and the one in Yonkers. And there's been a lot of opposition to charter schools, perhaps because the theory is that they take money out of the public school system. But is there a way to have charter schools not drain money from the public school budget and still coexist with the public school, with the public school system?
My view on charter schools is that while I appreciate that some students are given the opportunity to have a good education through them, I think what they're doing overall is undermining our public school education. And I think that's a ploy intended by promoters of charter schools to say, hey, look, see what we're doing here with a few kids, and it's eroding the foundations of the educational system. So I don't believe we should be funding charter schools. I don't think we should be giving tax breaks to donators to charter schools. I think that money should all go into our public school systems and able to nourish them and enrich them. But again, I understand that's a difficult thing without accountability. And that's why I believe, especially in Yonkers, and since the mayor is the leading official in this city, mayoral control of the school system will begin to solve that problem, and we won't even have to go down the path of creating more charter schools, because I do fundamentally believe it's going to just it won't help the public schools in the long run.
But in the interim, while everybody's bickering over the charter school versus the public school, you have kids that are in trailers now, studying.
Yeah.
What's going to help those kids in the interim while the situation is being ironed out?
It's going to take elected officials going up to Albany and demanding change and demanding that we're getting the funding we need. Right now, we're on the cusp of having the first state senate turn blue for the first time in a long time. Andrew Stewart-Cousins is and will be the leader of that party. This is an opportunity right now for Yonkers to say, if we can't get it now, we're not going to get it, okay? She's going to be the leader of the state senate. We have an assembly that's completely democratic. We could get the money in now, and I don't believe we have to go down that long. I think we could start right now in this new legislative session that's going to begin in January to start really focusing on it, and we don't have to worry about charter schools.
Well, I think that we can talk about schools on the other side of the break. We have to take a break, and we will be back.
Hello, and welcome to Kids Allowed Preschool, a place where your child is king. My name is Dr. Jennifer Schulman, and I'm the director at this wonderful place where children learn through play, where children incorporate the creative curriculum and teaching strategies gold. And you know, here is where the foundation starts. We build every child to reach their potential from where they are, and we take them to whatever heights they can be. Please look for us on the web, kidsaloudpreschool.com. Call us if you would like to schedule a tour, 914-349-9200. We're at 600 North Broadway, Yonkers, New York. Hope to see you soon.
Foil sprinkled with some motor oil. Ooh, they're putting oil on there.
Good job. Let me feel those big kicks, boys and girls. Big kicks for Bob. Big old kicks.
Push the window. Push the door. Back to downward dog.
Wow, wow, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Tashawn, join us. Come closer, right? Who's in the sky now? All the planets go around. Wow, wow.
Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. We were talking before the break about schools, the school situation, and we're going to continue with that. What would you tell the 251 school personnel that are about to be laid off? How could you reassure them that you are their guy coming up in the election?
Well, I feel that I can reassure them because these staff members that are on, throughout the school district, I feel they're constantly worried year after year about the security of their job. And I don't think anybody in any form of employment wants to feel constantly threatened about the future, their future and their security. So I think, like I was speaking before, it all goes back to making sure that Yonkers has the funds needed to provide the services essential, including paying their staff. Now, we cannot continue as a city and as a culture, really, to continue to use home property taxes as our only source of revenue to pay for these things. It must go back to making sure the wealthiest New Yorkers in this state are paying their fair share of taxes, whether that is closing the carried interest loophole on hedge fund managers that pay a lower tax rate than these teachers that are, threatened to be laid off. With the excess resources and accountability in the school districts of spending and hiring and firing, then they could be reassured that their jobs will be secure for a long time because there will be the funding there for them.
That's a very ambitious plan. And as a new kid on the block, again, if you get the job, as a new kid on the block, without a lot of allies in the Senate, and without a lot of favors that you can do, since you're the novice, how do you get these things done?
You say I'm the new kid on the block, and I will be the new kid on the block, and it is an ambitious plan. But I think the people of Yonkers are ready for an ambitious plan because they were dealing with this for.
But I'm talking about upstate. How do you wheel and deal to get the money to funnel down to Yonkers?
It's going to be about applying pressure to the politicians to put money where the people of this state want it. Not where I want it. I'm a representative of the people. So, a real change happens when people in Yonkers and the teachers and the students who go there say, enough is enough. I'm going to call the elected officials. I'm going to call the majority Senate leader. And I'm going to say, why do I have not music? Why do I not have music programs in my school? Why do I not have, after school sports? Why do I have to be in a class that's, overcrowded, or I'm in a ratio of 1,000 to 1 guidance counselor to student position. And when they're fed up and they elect politicians that are least willing to put in the effort to try to change this, and it's a wake-up call, I think you can then find that there will be change. It's going to be about everybody collectively saying, Yonkers needs more.
You are a filmmaker and a teacher.
Yes.
By profession. Not a slick politician.
Right.
And I don't want to offend any politicians out there. But there are some politicians that are slick. What makes you so passionate about government?
I'm passionate about government because I live in, my community, just like everybody else. And, I've seen, or I believe that there is a bright future awaiting Yonkers. I believe that with, the right steps and the right resources, and maybe a slight course correct in how we do business, not only in our local communities but our state-wide systems. And when ordinary people, when I believe real change occurs when ordinary people in their communities stand up and get involved. If we leave it up to entrenched politicians, lifetime politicians, career politicians, I don't believe we don't get change. We're going to get more of the same. So I'm getting involved, and I'm running my campaign because I believe that I really love living in Yonkers, my neighbors, my community, and I want to see it become a better place.
But this kind of thing, you don't get up on a Saturday morning and say, oh, you know something, I think I'm going to run for New York State Assembly.
No.
So this has to evolve. This has to have evolved from somewhere. Did it come from an aha moment? Did it come from soul searching? What was the genesis of your deciding that you want to run for this office?
Well, I perhaps could say that over the past, 3 years, I've been more and more actively engaged in politics in my community, listening to the city council, listening to the mayor, listening to the governor, listening to our president. And I think there has been a wake-up call in this country, in the past few years in terms of our politicians and who they stand for and who we're electing and why we're electing them. And so I'd say it's, a mixture of things over the past 4 years that have led me to the point to decide to, put my name in the hat for the race. It's an open seat right now, as you know. It's a shortened time scale. It's not a year-long campaign. I understand that this is a grassroots campaign coming from the ground up. So I wasn't going to challenge, a 30-year incumbent for this race, but I felt that the time was right. The time was now for me to get involved and at least put forth my platform, my values to the community, and then let them decide as to who they'd like to represent them in Albany.
Well, where do you stand on immigration, which is a hot topic now across the board with all political races?
Yeah.
So what is Yonkers is a city that's, I believe, 1/3 immigrant, and that may be an underestimate. I'm not sure. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's a big immigrant city, not only Yonkers, but other areas that would be under your governance. Portchester, to some extent. New Rochelle.
Again, the Assembly District is just Yonkers,
It's just Yonkers.
Yeah. So, but I am a first-generation Italian American. My parents are immigrants to this country. I am pro-immigrant. I think immigrants make our culture great. I think they bring things to us that help diversify, help bring in new ideas. Mixing of ideas, mixing of cultures is a good thing. I think the rhetoric that has come from the top down in this country in terms of immigration is divisive, to say the least. I do appreciate the sense that people want to have some sort of control over who's coming into this country, but I don't think, it needs to get to the levels of where it's been. I think there is a sane and humane way to do it. If you look what's happening, in the borders now, when we're separating children from their families. I mean, that's not the America that I don't think anybody wants to live in.
Well, one of the reasons why I ask the question is that there's been some discussion about Yonkers becoming a sanctuary city.
Right.
And a lot of people are opposed to it because once you declare yourself as a sanctuary city, then it makes you vulnerable to the feds withholding funds.
Right. Well, I will leave that for the city council and city hall to make the decision on whether they believe Yonkers should become a sanctuary city. I think it's important to protect our immigrants, for sure, but that would be outside of my capacities as a state assembly member.
And while we're on the subject of budgets,
Yes.
Yonkers has the dubious distinction of housing 46% of the homeless population of Westchester County. There's been a lot of there has been and continues to be a lot of resources that go into the homeless. Police resources, healthcare resources, a whole litany of resources. I mean, we could be here all day talking about how Yonkers inherited 46%
Right.
of the homeless population, but now the question is, how does Yonkers get out of it?
That's a good question. I think Yonkers shouldn't be placed with the burden of financially having to deal with 50%, up near
Almost
50% of the homeless population in Westchester when we live in one of the, if not the most affluent county in America. It needs to be spread out. Westchester County has been under attack by the federal government for years for not providing enough affordable housing and low-income housing in the northern sections of the county. If Yonkers is going to be left with the burden of housing and putting up homeless shelters, then I think the rest of the county and the county legislature should consider giving Yonkers the resources, strongly consider giving Yonkers the resources that it needs to, contain that and help the people get out of it. But I also think that there are other counties, the other cities in Yonkers need to take their fair share of the homeless people and take care of them as well.
But it all goes back to the same the same issue. Yonkers getting its fair share. Yonkers getting its fair share for schools. Yonkers getting its fair share for homeless. Yonkers getting its fair share for infrastructure. And it's gone on like this ad nauseum for years.
Yep.
And I'm not to belabor the point, but I'm just trying to understand how you break that logjam to get the money.
How you break the logjam is, again, by changing taxation within the state, the way we tax. And that's going to be sending representatives to Albany that are willing to push for lowering home property taxes and increasing taxes on the plutocrats and the oligarchs that do exist within our state, making sure they pay their fair share. Then we need a bigger pie, and Yonkers needs to get a bigger slice of the pie. The only way to get a bigger pie that will be sizable enough to do all these things is by making sure that the entrenched special interests, the entrenched money interests within the state are paying their fair share. If not, you could have someone on the show that's going to tell you something different. I don't believe that's ever going to change.
Well, Vince, that's a good way to end the interview. And I wish you a lot of luck. There's a lot of work ahead that needs to be done, I think, on all parts. But the thing is, at least you're sincere.
Thank you.
So, that's it for today. And thanks for watching, everyone. Stay tuned for the next episode of Yonkers Voice. Keep those comments coming, and we'll see you next time.